Hey guys, if you ever wanted to play a sorceress without any mana or cooldown, I'm happy to present you the Arc Lash Sorceress on endgame Diablo IV that my teammate Sliver made. You'll see that you'll destroy everything and that you can push after tier 65. I'll explain everything that you should know, and if you like the content of this video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Let's start with the skills, and you want to play Ice Armor for the tankiness, the Teleport for the mobility but also to pack enemies, the Frost Nova for vulnerables, and Unstable Currents as our ultimate. Of course, our main attack will be the Arc Lash, and you have the Flame Shield for immunity and healing. For the gear, you'll take increased armor, be careful to take the maximum possible on this one, and you want this unique armor which will pack enemies after using Teleport. You also have this glove which will improve crackling energy, and this one granting you additional damage reduction. For the boots, the fact that you can move through enemies with Flame Shield, and this one granting you increased damage when you have a barrier. After, you want this in order to increase damage to stun enemies, this one increase damage to vulnerable enemies when you have a barrier, and this one for increased attack speed. The last one increasing damage to stun or frozen enemies. For the gems, you'll want life in your armor parts, increased critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies, and armor in your accessories. For the enchantments, you want the Firebolt, which will be very good as a synergy with the Paragon setup and apply a burning effect. You also want the Ball Lightning enchantment in order to increase your damage output. For the gear, you'll want intelligence and everything linked to critical strike chance and critical strike damage. You can also take a bit of cooldown, and for the damage reduction, armor if you can, or damage reduction. Lastly, everything boosting your damage, for example, damage to vulnerable enemies, damage to crowd control enemies, and so on. For the skill tree, you'll max Arc Lash and the fact that it will reduce your cooldown, and you'll want 1 point in the Firebolt just to choose it as mastery. Then you'll get the 3 points here to get some resistances, and we have our utility and defense spell, the Flame Shield with the healing, the Teleport with the damage reduction, the barrier just 1 point on it, and the Frost Nova with the vulnerable. If you're not pushing too high, you can also swap this passive with this one in order to increase your damage. You can also take this passive which will reset one of your defensive skills on a lucky hit. After that, you get a bit of a lucky hit. Here you have some damage increase for each conjuration, and this one in order to grant you a barrier when you use a cooldown spell. Then you have this very interesting passive granting you increased critical strike on burning enemies, and we'll get this one for the chance to create crackling energy. You'll get this Ball Lightning, and then you want this, creating also crackling energy. We have our ultimate just here, and these two passive, the first one increasing critical strike chance, and this one increasing the damage reduction. For the ultimate, we also take the crackling energy, which will reduce your cooldown and hit one additional enemy. So now for the Paragon, you want to get this glyph. It will increase damage to vulnerable enemies. It's in dexterity. You get this rare nut, and we'll have our first board. So it's this passive. We don't need to take this one, but we want to get this glyph, which will increase damage to close enemies. You also have this effect, damage to burning enemies and damage to allies. Then we get this glyph which will increase damage after using a defensive skill and boost the blue nuts which are just nearby. We also don't want this legendary nut, so you can skip it, and then we'll get to this board. Don't forget to get this rare nut just here. We'll get to this board with this passive that we don't take, and the new glyph, this one which will increase your damage to crowd control enemies. You have this passive just here for damage to stun enemies, and the same here, damage to stun enemies. Then for the next board, you want to take this one, increasing the effect of crackling energy, and you have this glyph here, increasing damage to burning enemies. You also have this passive for the crackling and lightning damage, and then the last board just here, where you'll get non-physical damage, damage to elites, and here too also some non-physical damage. For the gameplay, it's quite a fun build to play. You just need to teleport in pack of enemies and use your Arc Lash. Of course, use your Flame Shield if you don't want to die by doing so. You have the Frost Nova to apply vulnerable and the Ice Armor for increased tankiness. When you see a pack, you can use your ultimate because you'll quickly have it for the next pack. It's the same for bosses or elites, you don't have any trouble for one target or packs. Thanks for watching this video. As usual, if you have any question, feel free to post in the comment, I'll be happy to answer you.